South Korea plans on upping the amount of tax refunds for those in the low-income bracket as a countermeasure to the increase in the country's minimum wage next year. The summit between the two strong men on the global stage comes to an end. U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin's first meetup in Helsinki. We talk with an expert about their first encounter. Words can't describe an extreme heat wave overwhelms South Korea again today on the first day of the hottest summer period that lasts for about a month. Our starting point this morning, lawmakers from the ruling Democratic Party of Korea and officials from the government met this morning to discuss measures to support people in the low-income bracket as a follow-up measure to the planned minimum wage increase for 2019. Now, during a policy coordination meeting this morning, the two sides agreed to increase the basic pension for elderly people in the lowest 20% bracket to roughly $260 by next year, 2 years earlier than originally planned. Now, they also plan to increase the number of people eligible for employment subsidies.
Labor groups as well as the opposition bloc agreed to earn income tax credits. This measure needs to be effectively implemented so that people can make up for their small income through tax returns.
We'll work to expand the social safety net of those in the low-income bracket, as well as carry out reforms so that innovation can be seen across the economy. At the same time, we'll step up fiscal measures and preemptive action against internal and external risks.
Now, the ruling party also promised to take all efforts to pass related bills, while the government promised to draw up policies that bring about changes that people can actually feel. The government will also announce a comprehensive set of measures on Wednesday. Shifting focus, the leaders of the United States and Russia held their first summit on Monday to discuss global issues, including that of North Korea's nuclear issues. Now, President Putin welcomed President Trump's engagement on denuclearizing the Korean Peninsula, while Trump welcomed close cooperation with Moscow in solving that matter. Our Kim Choongsoo with more.
U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin sat down for a one-on-one meeting on Monday in Helsinki. The two leaders held private talks for nearly 4 hours in the Finnish capital, touching upon a wide range of issues, including trade, nuclear arms, and China. The denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula was one of their key agenda items. President Trump said he briefed his Russian counterpart on the results of the first-ever North Korea-U.S. summit held in Singapore last month.
We also discussed one of the most critical challenges facing humanity, nuclear proliferation. I provided an update on my meeting last month with Chairman Kim on the denuclearization of North Korea, and after today, I am very sure that President Putin and Russia want very much to end that problem, going to work with us, and I appreciate that commitment.
Putin hailed Trump's efforts in settling the North's nuclear issue.
It's good that the issue of the Korean Peninsula started to resolve gradually. To a large extent, it became possible because President Trump personally got involved into the settlement, building the dialogue in the spirit of cooperation and not confrontation.
The two leaders also said Washington and Moscow must find ways to cooperate in the pursuit of shared interests. Following the summit aimed at resetting the two countries' frosty relations, President Trump said their bilateral ties, which have never been worse, had changed for the better as of about several hours ago. Kim Choongsoo, Arirang News.
And we delve a little deeper into that summit between President Trump and Putin that took place in Helsinki on Monday. Now, with me in studio to talk about the Superpower Summit is Dr. Kim Choongsoo at the Korea Institute of Defense Analyses. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me again.
Now, let's get into it again. There was a strong outcry even before the actual summit took place, and even after. Now, U.S. President Donald Trump is under even more fire after siding with Putin during a press conference on the issue of the 2016 election meddling, and instead placing blame on the FBI and the Democrats back home. So what do you make of his comments, and do you foresee this being a major problem for President Trump moving ahead in the weeks and months to come?
Yeah, sure. It will be a very major problem for Mr. Trump to go ahead, because this has been all the attentions from media attention world, not only from the United States but across the world. But now with after this meeting with Mr. Putin, this problem has come to the fore. I mean, the so-called the Russiagate, the collusion between the United States and Soviet Union during the 2016 presidential election. I think this will have a tremendous impact not only on the U.S. domestic politics, but also on some U.S. policies in connections with U.S. allies and South Korea as well. South Korea will have definitely be under a kind of impact, even though it's kind of be a remote and indirect impact. Right. But there are no ways escaping this kind of U.S. politics, because it is Mr. Trump who will be the center of this all political problem in North Korea and in the United States. And if you look at because Mr. Trump has been so far very supportive of our denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, but also building a new relationship with North Korea. Right. But if he kind of, has been forced to distract his attention and focus on the Korean politics, particularly the denuclearization, it will have definitely some negative impacts. But I don't know, maybe he may take a different approach, because he's primarily siding by the U.S. domestic politics. He may look for some alternative escape. That is, he is going to do some more for the resolution of the Korean Peninsula, including the North Korean nuclear issues, and also building a new relationship with North Korea. You never know. So this is too risky to what kind of impact it'll have on us in terms of denuclearization and signing a new peace treaty, for example, or declaring an end to the Korean War. But definitely it'll take more time of Mr. Trump, his interests, away from what he originally intended to. So I think we have to wait and see, but it's not a good positive move in any way, by any standard. Okay.
And you've mentioned it also in your previous remarks, but this Helsinki summit on Monday comes at a critical time for U.S. President Donald Trump, because he just wrapped up his tour of European nations, where he rattled some of America's closest allies for a long time, and now strongly siding with authoritarian adversary in Russia. Now, not just that, the U.S. is also mired in a tariff war with the world's second largest economy, which is China. Do you consider Trump's actions with multiple countries and his approach to international diplomacy, does that worry South Korea at all?
Oh yeah, we should be worried about it, but we should be more alarmed by his recent behavior with NATO leaders, and also in Helsinki, and with the British Queen, as a matter of fact, because he's really tried to put everything under his control. I think he really wants to be the center of all media focus. That, as an extension of that, Mr. Trump will continue to do some very important role, eclipsing all others on the central stage. So we have to be very concerned about, because South Korea made it very clear, we are going to play a much more leading role in terms of denuclearization. But I don't know how much we'll really achieve that goal, because Mr. Trump is so egocentric, and he really wants to get all the media attentions. So we have to really come up with a kind of idea how we're going to capitalize on this very specific approach by Mr. Trump. So not necessarily in a negative, I should say. We have to keep very kind of hope, because we have to hope for the best, and really we have to prepare for the worst.
Not sort of a leadership that we've seen in the past, definitely.
Very much so, yes.
And also during a press conference, as you've mentioned, as U.S. had been showing its willingness to make bilateral relations with North Korea, during a press conference with Russian president, both leaders also reaffirmed their commitment in pursuing the denuclearization process in the Korean Peninsula. But with the Helsinki summit coming at a time when Pyongyang's plans of denuclearization doesn't necessarily seem to be in tune with the U.S. What can we expect from the two sides going forward in handling North Korea-related issues?
At the Helsinki summit, they were talking about so many agenda, but one of them was North Korean denuclearization. And I'm sure the United States and Russia will continue to play a very important role in really persuading North Korea to denuclearize all their weapons and technology. Because former Soviet Union was the country that has actually transferred all the nuclear technology to North Korea. It was not China, but it was Russia back then, Soviet Union back then. And also, Soviet Union was the countries that undergone like a CTR, what we call CTR, called threat reductions. So Russia has a lot of things to offer to South Korea and the United States when it comes to denuclearization. So one thing very clear is Mr. Putin and Mr. Trump made it very clear they will continue to work on those issues, and no question about that, because this is in their best interest. Denuclearizing North Korea and building a new peace treaty on the Korean Peninsula, it is definitely in the best interest of the United States and in the Russian Federation, as a matter of fact. So I think the two leaders will really try to confirm their agreements, and this is not just the kind of verbal agreements, but they have the capability and knowledge about North Korean nuclear dealings in the past and in the future as well. So in that sense, these two countries will continue to play a very important role in really pursuing North Korea and also really driving in the right path toward the denuclearization in the long run, because they have the experience, they have the technology, and they have still very good connection with the Pyongyang leadership.
Mostly Russia at the moment as well,
yes,
too.
That's right.
Dr. Kim Choongsoo, thank you for your time today again.
My pleasure. Okay.
The Trump administration has stepped up its global trade dispute by filing complaints against the 5 nations and alliances at the World Trade Organization, challenging their retaliatory tariffs. Now, for more on this and other news around the world, we turn to our Arirang at the NewsCenter. So, Aram, this trade war is showing no signs of dying down.
That's right, Simon. U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer said in a statement Monday that the U.S. was challenging retaliatory tariffs launched by the EU, China, Canada, Mexico and Turkey. The 5 imposed those tariffs in response to Washington's duties on steel and aluminium imports. Lighthizer defended America's taxing of those products, saying it was in line with WTO rules and on the grounds of national security. But he did say it was not. But he said it was not okay for other countries to retaliate because their tariffs were designed to punish American workers, farmers, and companies. China, however, is not backing down and has filed its own complaint at the WTO against the US. Beijing is challenging last week's decision by Washington to impose new tariffs on $200 billion worth of Chinese goods. Meanwhile, the International Monetary Fund is keeping its original forecast for global economic growth unchanged this year, despite concerns over rising trade tensions and higher oil prices. However, they warn of growing damage from the trade spat between the United States and China. Our Lee Seung-jae reports.
Despite the growing concerns over rising trade tensions and rising oil prices worldwide, the International Monetary Fund has left its global economic growth forecast unchanged at 3.9% for both 2018 and 2019, compared to its previous forecast issued back in April. According to the IMF's chief economist Maury Obstfeld, these projections only take into account tariffs currently in force, so larger actions such as possible automobile tariffs were not included. Despite the growth forecast being kept unchanged, Obstfeld added that growth momentum was slowing. While the IMF rounded down the growth projections to reach the 3.9% forecast in April, for the July forecast, the numbers were rounded up slightly to reach the same figure. The forecast for the two countries in the middle of a huge trade spat were both unchanged as well, as the U.S. growth forecast was pegged at 2.9% in 2018 and 2.7% in 2019, while China's growth was forecast at 6.6% in 2018 and 6.4% in 2019. The IMF warns that the escalating trade conflict following the U.S. tariff actions threatened to derail the economic recovery and depress medium-term growth forecasts. Taking into consideration the potential damage from the full brunt of President Trump's tariff threat,
Combined with the subsequent retaliation from trading partners, the annual global economic output may be reduced by 0.5% from projections for 2020. That translates to close to $500 billion in lost annual output based on IMF projections, which is the equivalent of subtracting an economy the size of Thailand. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Shifting gears now, the French national football team has received a hero's reception as thousands gathered in Paris on Monday to welcome back the World Cup champions. Fans dressed in red, white and blue gave rapturous cheers as the squad paraded down the Champs-Élysées in an open-top bus. The champions were then welcomed at the Élysée Palace by President Emmanuel Macron, who was at the final in Moscow. Macron had also promised to give the team France's highest accolade, the Legion of Honor. Despite the jubilant atmosphere, however, some celebrations were marred by violence, causing police to use tear gas to disperse crowds. Meanwhile, runners-up Croatia were also given a hero's welcome home, with thousands gathering in Zagreb. Adidas is joining a number of companies that are reducing the use of plastic, pledging to use recyclable materials by the year 2024. The world-famous sportswear brand announced Monday that it will stop using newly manufactured plastic in its clothing, offices and outlets. Instead, it said it will use 100% recycled polyester in every product and on every application where a solution exists. About 41% of recycled polyester will be used in Adidas's 2019 spring and summer clothing line.
It's another sizzling hot summer day here in Korea, with temperatures hovering above 30 degrees Celsius across the country. And today it's also Chobok, the first day of the hottest period of summer, and people here in Korea have their own ways to beat the heat. Our Seobin tells us more.
Seoul's first heat wave warning of the year was issued on Monday as the daytime high soared to a sweltering 34 degrees Celsius. However, such temperatures at this time of the year aren't out of the ordinary in Korea. In fact, Koreans mark the coming of midsummer with a series of days based on the lunar calendar, and Tuesday is known as Chobok, the start of a long period of scorching weather that hits Korea between July and August. During this time of the year, many Koreans tend to eat healthy foods to give them the energy to cope with heat. One of the popular dishes is samgyetang, a soup made with chicken and ginseng. Many people search at samgyetang restaurants, but this year was extra special for the older residents of Seoul's Dongdaemungu district. There was a samgyetang sharing event provided for elderly residents to keep them cool.
In our community, in celebration of Chobok, we have laid on this event to help our older residents enjoy a healthy summer.
Many elderly men and women gathered at the Imundong Community Service Center to enjoy a free bowl of samgyetang to give them the energy to fight off the heat.
I feel very energetic and strong. Samgyetang is the best for Koreans.
In Korea, people try to beat the heat in various ways, but with several more weeks of intense temperatures and high humidity expected, a few more bowls of samgyetang might do the trick. Seobin, Arirang News.
And South Korea is also marking its 70th Constitution Day today. In marking the day, we take a look back at how South Korea's constitution has been amended over the decades and whether we'll see a promised 10th Amendment anytime soon. Our Kim Mo-gyan reports.
7 decades ago today, South Korea formally adopted its first constitution. It has been amended 9 times since then, with each revision reflecting the nation's footsteps towards democracy. Past revisions focused on the nation's power structure. In 1972, Korea's former president Park Chung-hee changed the constitution to allow indirect presidential elections, and in 1980, the constitution was revised to adopt a 7-year single-term presidency under then-president Chun Doo-hwan. But through the June Democratic Movement in 1987, the dictatorship came to an end and the constitution was once again revised to allow direct presidential elections and a 5-year single-term presidency.
Korea has been observing the 9th revision of the Constitution for the past 30 years. Its basic principles center on the sovereignty of the people, the separation of power, and the pursuit of peaceful unification of the two Koreas. Lately, there have been calls for a 10th revision, and President Moon Jae-in had expressed hopes that the process could have been held alongside the local elections in June. But opposition from numerous lawmakers meant the plan was scrapped.
With the societal changes that have occurred over the past decade, such as the development of IT and issues concerning low birth rate and an aging society, public demand for the revision has been strong, as many want to directly participate in creating a new constitution.
In Korea, any constitutional revision requires the support of more than 2/3 of the members of the National Assembly before it can be put to a national referendum. But according to experts, with the current distribution of parliament, prospects for a constitutional amendment in the near future don't seem too bright. Kim Mo-gyan, Arirang News.
In other news, the two Koreas are unified again over table tennis. Continuing their sports diplomacy, the two sides are competing together at the Korea Open that begins today in South Korea's central city of Daejeon. And before the big games, the players tested out their chemistry and compatibility. Our Kan Hyung-woo tells us more.
South and North Korea will be competing as one this week in table tennis for only the 3rd time in history at this year's Korea Open, which begins on Tuesday in Daejeon. The North Korean players arrived in the South on Sunday and held 2 practice sessions on Monday with their South Korean teammates. 4 joint teams will take on players from all over the world in the men's, women's, and mixed doubles over the course of the 6-day tournament. According to the Korea Table Tennis Association, South Korea's Lee Sang-soo will pair up with the North Park Shin-hyuk for the men's doubles event, and in the women's doubles, it will be Seo Hyo-won and Kim Song-hee. For mixed doubles, South Korea's Jang Woo-jin and North Cha Hyo-shim will play together, as will Yoon Chung and Choi Il. The two Koreas have already played together once before this year. Back in May, they formed unified teams at the World Team Table Championship in Sweden, where South Korea's Seo Hyo-won and the North's Kim Song-hee paired up to take home the bronze medal. Representing peace and harmony on the international stage through sports, the two Koreas' joint teams will now seek to use this so-called ping-pong diplomacy to show the world how well they can work together. Kan Hyung-woo, Arirang News, Daejeon.
And the joint team for table tennis has a long history starting from the 1991 World Table Tennis Championships. Now, the 2018 Korea Open is the 3rd time that the two Koreas have formed a unified joint team. And the joint team has been very successful in previous outings. Our Hong-yu tells us more.
Nervous but smiling, the North Korean table tennis players landed in South Korea on Monday. They are taking part in the 2018 International Table Tennis Federation World Tour Platinum Korea Open, which starts today. And in that tournament, South and North Korea will participate as a joint team. This is the 3rd time that the South and North Korean players have played on the same side of the table since 1991. But it is the 2nd time this year after the 2018 World Table Tennis Championships. Table tennis was the first sport that the two Koreas formed a joint team in. And in their first tournament, the World Table Tennis Championships in 1991, the joint team stunned the Korean peninsula by winning a gold medal in the women's team event against the favorites China. North Korean Lee Bun-hee and South Korean Hyun Jung-hwa had only met before on opposite sides of the table, but their teamwork made such a result possible. The friendship that Lee and Hyun had developed later became the theme of the movie As One. Hyun, now the coach of the joint team, said in an interview with Yonhap that she is looking forward to meeting with Lee again in the near future. But this time, the attention will be focused on Seo Hyo-won from South and Kim Song-hee from North, who are participating in the women's team event. It is their first time playing in a team event, but South and North Korea recently played as a joint team in the World Table Tennis Championships in May. The joint team won 3rd place in that tournament, and Coach Hyun hopes that this team plays well in this tournament just like they did in the previous ones so they can make many Koreans happy. Hong-yu, Arirang News.
And that'll do it for us at the hour on Arirang News. But keep it tuned for more news updates coming up at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching and goodbye for now.
Literally speaking, a comma in your life. Then, under a tree blowing in the wind, I look up for a long, long time, listening to the rustle of glistening leaves. Then, will you come at last?
우리가 살다가 나무 한 그루 보이면 서서 그 나무를 한번 자세히 바라보는 시간을 가졌으면 좋겠어요. 나무에 바람이 불면 바람 부는 나무가 되고, 새가 앉으면 새가 앉은 나무가 되고, 비가 오면 비가 앉은 나무가 돼요. 나무는 바라볼 때마다 완성이 되어 있고 바라볼 때마다 다릅니다. 새로운 세계를 창조해내는 거예요. 시란, 바로 그런 여유를 사람들에게 새로운 세계를 꿈꾸도록, 새로운 희망을 갖도록 마치 나무에 바람이 부는 것처럼 사람의 마음을 움직여주는 글이에요.
Contented heart only when you pause for a moment. Arirang.
(2018) has been a big year for international diplomacy in Korea, and there are profound changes happening between different nations every day. Arirang TV's new show, The Diplomat, will dive deeper into the importance of cooperation, reinforcing relationships between South Korea and its close allies. Join us as we connect with foreign ambassadors to better understand Korean politics, economy, culture, and more.